Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Bricks King podcast, where I'm going to bend your ear about Lego, review those amazing bricks and plastic, and discuss what is new and up and coming around the Lego world. I'm your Minifigure host, Matt. Let's bet on it. Welcome in, everybody. How are we doing today? We are talking Lego Masters. Yeah, one of my favorite things to do. Lego Masters Season 2, Episode 9 recap show here for you. And boy, it's starting to get down to the wire. It continues to get closer and closer and scarier. So today we're going to talk about Lego Masters and what in the world has just happened in the most recent show. If you have currently not caught up, make sure you go back and, watch the actual show before you listen to this. If you don't want any spoilers, because there will definitely be spoilers in this. So let's talk about it. This week, they had the Land and Sea Challenge. And what was kind of interesting is they had Evil Will obviously come back again. But what they did is they had solo builds where the partners had to go off on their own and build a land or sea creature or setting or something like that. Whatever they wanted to do. No communication was being had in between with the partners or anybody. You were just off, you're building your own thing. Now, you may think, oh, but they can see what they're building. No, they had a wall that went down the middle of the studio, so you could not see what your teammate was building. So, of course, in traditional Lego style, Fox TV show style, what they chose to do is it's going to be then a mashup. You have your individual builds. They weren't judged, by the way. So you have individual builds, not judged, really cool looking, and then they had to mash them up. They had to put them together and make them a new creature or a new idea. You could obviously take what was had and then run with that or build upon it or, but it had to look something completely different is what the judges were looking for. Something radical, something new, have a new identity all around. Now, at first, I will admit, when I heard what the challenge was, I was not a big super fan of this because I thought, they really did some really cool builds. I mean, Caleb and Jacob had their own really awesome builds. Mark and Steven made an awesome jellyfish, an awesome giraffe. I was like, oh my God, why do they have to break these apart and come up with something new? It just, it killed me. So let's start with Caleb and Jacob. Caleb and Jacob, one made a chameleon, one made a lobster. They were wicked on their own. The chameleon was blue, by the way. Anyway, so they chose to make a camellia lobster. I probably can't, camellia lobster, whatever. In Brick Bog, and Brick Bog is just the setting that they created. But here is what is cool. The bog that they did was obviously all brick built, but their log that they had this thing sitting on, if you've ever seen a log, you've ever cut a tree open, even an old tree and stuff, you kind of see the different tree rings and stuff like that. And they kind of got that feel on the inside of their log, right at the end there. It obviously wasn't rings the whole way around, but like if you cut open a tree sometimes and you see like the rotten part or whatever, they had that in there. That was so well done. I was really impressed by that. But then there were also all these other little details, just lots of them to make it look like something straight out of a what you would pull from a book. If an author wrote this or you saw it on a television show, like it was, all the little details were there, from the plants and the fungi that was there to the look of the camellia lobster sitting on the log itself. It was just really cool the way it was done. And it just, the mushrooms that they had there were really neat in the way that they were built. And it just had this ambiance of, not so much scary, just kind of like, you don't want to be here. Like, this isn't the nicest, coolest place to go chill out and hang in. So it had a chameleon body, and then it had the lobster appendages and stuff and the antennae that were off of the end of the lobster, obviously, as well. I really liked the idea. I thought it was a really cool idea. It was very, very well done. I think they accomplished way more than they probably expected. I know the judges were smitten by it. I thought it was fantastic. So David and Richard, man, they created two different things here. They created coral, a little kind of like a seabed of coral, and then also a penguin. And the penguin was huge, absolutely huge. And what they chose to do is they chose to create something new, and Poco the punk rock penguin. So essentially what this was is they kept the penguin as a penguin. He had a guitar, he had, an amplifier there, he had some other stuff, a sign, he had obviously he's eating fish and stuff like that, going with the sea theme there. And you had fish on ice. I mean, you kind of had this feel of ice for the background, the area where the penguin was standing. And then the punk rock part of it, they gave him a coral mohawk. She, whatever the penguin was, the coral mohawk, I thought was really kind of neat. It was cool. And I loved the build. For what the build was, I absolutely loved it. This was something that I would expect to see at like a show. Like you go to any event, you could see something bizarre like this there and be like, whoa, what is this? It really gives you an outside the box feel for something. And again, it was very large. And the penguin was really, really well done. My only question becomes, is it mashup enough? Like with what Caleb and Jacob did, you saw, oh man, by far, theirs is it's got to be like number 1, number 2. It's got to be up there. Just of how detailed of an intricately woven build that was between the two was incredible. So the question becomes, is it mashup worthy enough? I don't know. So Mark and Steven came into this still holding on to the golden brick, and they chose to hold on to it yet again for another week, which, you just never know. You might think, wow, I can kick butt in this challenge, but there's always a twist. And obviously the twist this week caught them by surprise because, like I said, their giraffe and jellyfish were amazing in the way that they were created. But what they chose to do is they called it a gelraff. So they took the head of the giraffe, used the body of the jellyfish, and created new tentacles using the feet, the legs of a giraffe, an idea from the giraffe. So you had multiple different giraffe legs hanging down. And I thought that was kind of neat. The issue that I saw with this was it didn't feel like it molded well. Like you had a really nicely built from I guess what the chest up of a giraffe on top of this jellyfish, which was much larger in scale, just didn't look right. I think the scale, because one of them had mentioned it, one of the brothers had mentioned about the scale, and I think that was probably what did them in here with their build, was their scale just didn't match. You had this big bulbous jellyfish and this smaller head, neck area of a giraffe sitting on top. It just didn't mold very well. So maybe having to rebuild a giraffe head could have been something maybe that was done. I don't know. But it definitely wasn't my favorite build. Now, I will say, along with what Jamie said, their environment with the kelp forest that was around this was beautifully done. Obviously, of course it was. It was a new build. So that changes things, right? But they had those translucent greenish pieces that were in there wrapped with solid green. Oh, it was so pretty. It was so pretty. It caught the light. And I think that was a big thing because when you think about a kelp forest isn't super deep. It's not like down in the pit of the ocean. It's, where sun can still get to it fairly shallow in the sense of the depth of the ocean. And I thought that was really neat. Natalie and Michelle, oh my goodness. They created something that, So one created a rat, one created an eel, and they called it a ratilian. Just was, ugh. It's things nightmares are kind of made of. Anyway, so it had a rat head and an eel body. Now, obviously, these are two different things that are going to be very difficult to mash up. I mean, do you put legs on the eel's body? What do you do? How do you take those two and do that? Because those are two very, very different concepts. Very, very unique animals and just completely difficult to get the most out of combining them together. It was a very colorful build when they mashed this thing up. Very colorful. I loved the cheese environment. The head of the rat was modified a little bit. It just didn't look great. It just kind of looked like a head on a body, but still, it did work. It did come across nice. just not as nice as some of the others. And then, you compare to Caleb and Jacob and you're like, oh crap. So with that in mind, their cheese environment was super cool. Obviously lots of yellow, but different texture to it, different heights. And then you throw in a mousetrap that's in there that has a slice of blue cheese that's sitting on it, just kind of cool, just kind of different, kind of interesting. So then Zach and Wayne are up, and Zach and Wayne they just continue to get things done. They continue to show up to challenges, and Zach and Wayne, they created a lion croc lair. Now, a lionfish is what they made, and then they also made a croc. So then you have the lion croc mix, and I got to tell you, they did what Caleb and Jacob did. They took, yes, their builds were exquisite, but the way that they took them and mashed them up and then built up off of that mashup was intense, because this thing was huge, had poisonous barbs and spines sticking out all over the place. Looks scary. Take like an anglerfish mixed with a lionfish, mixed with something else in the ocean. It's got really big teeth, and then take like the spines of like a porcupine and stick on there, but they're poisonous. Like you could have a horror film off of this. Like it reminded me of something that you would see in a really bad B-rate movie. Like this weird animal, this really bad computer-generated enemy animal that humans are having to stay away from and fight and find its lair and stuff like that. That's what it felt like. It's absolutely what it felt like. But man, it was super cool in the way that it was done. They also had the environment that this thing was in, and just a lot of vertical foliage, underwater foliage, stuff like that to kind of go along with it. And it did feel lairish, not as much as I thought. Like I was expecting kind of like an outcropping sticking up above, and this thing kind of tucked into the shadows a little bit. But I'm glad they didn't do it that way. What do I know, right? But I'm glad they didn't do it that way, because you really got to see the entire just giant fish croc deal. Oh man, it was neat. So that brings us to the point where, okay, top two, bottom two. Now, if you already know, then you already know. But I've got to say, I really had a difficult time picking my own winner here. It was it was definitely a tie for me in almost every respect, and then I sided with the judges as well. I thought they chose the best one this time. And who I'm referring to, you have your top two. You have Caleb and Jacob, and then you have Zach and Wayne. One of them has to win. And their builds were remarkable. And they were really the only two teams that deserved to even be close to the top two. The rest, y'all did good builds. It was you were in a different realm. You were not up at the top tier compared to these two teams. Even, Steven and his brother Mark, they just weren't there. They just were not there. So Caleb and Jacob ultimately ended up winning. And obviously there's no golden brick or anything at that point in time to be able to take home or anything. So that's kind of sad. It kind of sucks, but you move along, you figure it out, and you get better and whatever. Or at least you hope that you have an opportunity to pick it up in the future when hopefully there's a challenge where, we're going to throw the brick at it and see what happens. So again, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't envy the judges in this case, because that was a super important decision for a number of reasons. Very difficult to pick between the two. It's just very difficult. So they were my 1 and 2. So let's talk about the bottom two. So we had Natalie and Michelle and Dave and Richard. Natalie and Michelle's build was very not what I would expect from them. I will be completely honest. I thought they did great builds on their own, but the mix, again, how do you mix an eel and a rat? That is very difficult to do. I understand, the judges are going to say, well, that's what makes this challenge, because you have to think outside of the box. And how do you think outside of the box? I would love to know what Jamie and Amy would have done with a rat and an eel. What are you going to do? Honestly, what are you going to do? So unfortunately, they're in the bottom two here. And their build wasn't even, in my opinion, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't great. But they're in the bottom two. Dave and Richard ended up here in the bottom two. This is a bad place to be. You don't want to keep pushing at the end here. In the bottom, it sucks you. It sucks the energy out of you, and you got to turn around and be ready to go again. It's like, how can you focus if you're caught up here in the bottom? And their build was nice. Like I said, the mashup part of it, was it there? Really not. And how do you? Here's another one. How do you mash up coral with a penguin? I think they did a really good job in doing the best that they could. But how do you really take that and figure out, this is how I'm going to do it? This is how I'm going to do a mashup of coral and a penguin, which really don't have a whole lot to do together with each other. Just kind of a difficult thing to do. And I thought their build was awesome. They created something new. There wasn't enough coral there. I mean, do you have, I don't even know. I really honestly don't even know what else you could have done with that. I really don't. So unfortunately, they were the ones to go home. Dave and Richard are out. And then there were 4 teams. So if you're wondering, oh, well, where do you rank everybody? Well, mine go like the judges said, the 1, 2 right there. And then it was a tie for me between Mark and Steven and Natalie and Michelle. So I know you can't do that. You have to choose one or the other. Well, I'm telling you, one is 3A and one is 3B. And then obviously, Dave and Richard are in the bottom. I thought between the 2 girls and Mark and Steven, I thought, you know what? They're pretty much on the same level here. They may have had slightly more detail, but I liked the Gouda forest-y area that this thing was living in, and then the mousetrap. I thought that was cool. I liked that better than the kelp. I thought the builds were pretty much the same. I didn't like the giraffes stuck on top of the jellyfish, but what do I mean, that's just my opinion. You have your own opinion. It wasn't my favorite part of, the contest of a build from them. If it was solo builds, dude, they win. I'm pretty sure they win because they were so well done. So here's what I wanted to say next. You've got 4 teams left. You have Natalie and Michelle, horse, one of my horses. Zach and Wayne, one of my horses. Caleb and Jacob continue to just punch people in the mouth. They just continue to show up and just kick people, man. Just straight, right to the teeth. And Mark and Steven, the question now becomes there's a handful of shows left. With Mark and Steven, if they come across something like this again, they still have the golden brick. They do. They still have it in their possession. They have the opportunity to use it to be able to stay safe. The question will be, are they overly confident ahead of time not to use it? At some point in time, you're not going to be able to use it. It's like on the show Survivor. At some point in time, you're not going to be able to use your immunity idol. It's voided. So the question becomes, are they going to be able to put their pride behind them of being great builders? And I'm not questioning them. That's not what I'm trying to do. But are they able to put that behind them and say, if they have a build kind of like today, and say, you know what, we have to do this. We've got to use it now to survive. Not wait until that final show when it is the last time to use it, which is coming quick. But man, that's going to be a tough question, because you don't want to get sucked into the midfield of a battle like it was today, where your builds were great on their own, but the mashup wasn't there. Now, had they created a jellyfish and, I don't know, a seahorse or something like that, it probably would have looked great. It probably would have been completely different, but it just, they didn't mesh well, right? They just didn't really mesh well. If you look at what Caleb and Jacob did, you had animals that have legs. They meshed pretty well. You can take the lobster's, legs and claws and throw it onto the chameleon and still get that feel and tell the story. Zach and Wayne, a crocodile, a lionfish, water creatures to a certain degree, fierce creatures, scary looking creatures. You can make that, you can play on that. So unfortunately, it was kind of luck of the draw of what your partner chose to build. I mean, coral and a penguin. I mean, what else? That is about as furthest away from each other as you could get for a build to really mash up. I don't know how you could really do anything else than what they did. Some of you at home right now are like, oh my God, I could have done this and this and this. Somebody could have. Yes, absolutely. It just didn't happen. So next week we move on to another challenge, another opportunity, and see what happens and see who goes home next. You really honestly never know. There are always chances that you show up to the challenge and it's either maybe something you are not comfortable with, or maybe you just have a mechanical failure, a physical failure of your building. Once whatever you're building, you just never know. And that's what the unknowns are here. All that unknown stuff really changes week to week, build to build. And even from today's show, the individual builds and then having to push them together and make something. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody. We should have known when Evil Will was talking, but alas, we didn't. So I will see you guys next week as we turn the page on another episode of Lego Masters. Man, it's coming down quick. Whew. So I'm curious to know. I would love to know who you guys think is going to win. I've challenged you all the entire time. I am curious to see who you think is going to win. So until that next episode, I'm your minifig host, Matt. Let's build on it.